we recording? We're recording. Okay, we're recording. So right before, hello everybody. It's us again.
Hi.
So right before I hit record, we had started just talking, and we usually talk a little bit before we start about what we're going to talk about. But then Sarah started getting really into it because she posted this morning about a film called Maurice and Brokeback Mountain, and it was kind of because she had watched Love, Simon the other day. So Sarah, take us on this journey with you.
Well, okay, I don't know how much of the post I should go over, but you could really retitle the post, Sarah is still upset about Brokeback Mountain 15 years later. Because
she hasn't seen, by the way.
I haven't seen, that I'm sure is great. Like, I'm not talking about quality.
Yeah.
But I love stories, and included in love stories are LGBTQIA, inclusive love stories. And even when I was young, I wanted inclusive love stories. I guess it was in my early 20s when Brokeback Mountain came out. And it was a downer ending. And I didn't go see it for that reason. And everybody's like, it's great. And I'm like, I just was cynical at the time that the reason it gets to be great is because it has a downer ending. And that makes it acceptable. And it's like, I dislike progressivism that isn't actually that progressive. Where it's like, and I know this isn't the tone the movie takes, but there's something about like, it's so great. It's, we're being really progressive. We're loving this movie about gay men, and one of them dies for his sins. It's so great. And it's like, what? And I know that's not what the movie. I'm reducing. I'm greatly reducing.
You're greatly reducing a movie you haven't seen.
Right. But the fact is that they don't live happily ever after. One of them dies. It's pretty unhappy. And everybody's like, this is the greatest thing ever. And I was like, no, gonna skip it. Like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm gonna watch Queer as Folk, which also didn't have a lot of happy endings, but at least it was more fun. And this various problematic, Japanese yaoi stuff instead. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so here's the thing, with a little more setup to this is that, so Sarah watched Love, Simon, which I saw in theaters when it came out, and Sarah skipped, and I have a critic, and so I enjoyed Love, Simon. I didn't think it was great. As time has gone on, I've sort of been like, it was cute. It's not a great movie. There's stuff that doesn't make sense, and, characters who are shits for not good reasons and dumb things, but, like, it was an enjoyable movie, and, it's, spoilers, a happy ending.
Yeah.
Love, Simon gets he finds his guy. Who knows what happens to them, but it's nice, right?
It's a high school film,
Right. But like it leads into this problem that you're speaking to, where it's like, it's almost like it's that weird thing where like these films are only good. Like it's in all of, this is a problem in all of criticism. If it isn't serious, it isn't good, which isn't true. But there's like this.
Yeah. But I don't even, there are happy, the same pair that did Maurice, who is a gay couple, director, producer, gay couple, did A Room with a View. And that has that's more about being free in society. And it is, I haven't watched it. I've seen it twice, but not recently. It's good. It has Helena Bonham Carter and Crispin Glover. I think Daniel Day-Lewis is in there. It's a good movie, and it is progressive in the sense of like being about sexually free, not in a way of sleeping with the same gender or stuff like that, right. But it is about like freeing yourself from society, and that got a lot of accolades. Like I'm not talking that like it needed to win. Maurice, to go back to my, came out almost 20 years before Brokeback Mountain, has a happy ending romantically, was directed and produced by a gay couple, was written by a gay man, based on a gay couple, and it's good. It's good. It's by the same people who did A Room with a View and Howard's End, I think. I might have that one wrong, but one of those type period ones. They make good movies, but it just like faded from, I think it probably was out of circulation. I don't know. And it just bugs me.
It's more of a problem where, like, if it's a movie about so like, you know, it's like this weird thing where, so like, even how about this? So there's movies like, oh, Luna's very cute in the background. It's very like, so if it's a gay couple, like, you almost expect things to go badly, right? And that's a problem because that's what a lot of movies you see do. On all of them, just tends to be slightly more mainstream issues. Now, movies like Love, Simon have come out. Rafiki, which isn't really mainstream, but it did get a release. Like, that's like a small, and so there's movies where it's like, so that question, but then it's also like, that's an issue with almost like non-white cinema, almost like anything that isn't about the majority tends to have that feeling. Like, if it's about minorities or about a subculture or anything like that, you almost expect it to be darker in general, unless it's like a musical or something, like, unless it's a particular genre or something.
You don't want the happy slaves of Gone with the Wind, and that's fine. And I like happy endings that are earned and not completely unrealistic, but that's part of the problem. Was Roger Ebert is like, Maurice is unrealistic, and meanwhile it was based on a real couple. Like, their life was probably hard, but they got to be together, and that's what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for them to, like, get married and change the face of England, because that would have been unrealistic. And part of the Love, Simon thing, I did not love Love, Simon. I found it was written by a woman my age who's heterosexual, and there's just something very, I mean, it's mainstream, and I think there's an importance to mainstream stuff. You know, it's like Black Panther. I didn't really love Black Panther, but I think it's important that it exists. I think it's important that mainstream cinema have minority, you know, that it's not like a separate but equal thing where we have this LGBT cinema on the side.
We don't want to segregate our cinema.
Yeah, like, I don't want that. So I approve of Love, you know, that I enjoyed plenty of not great, you know.
It's also like
films.
Okay, so I have 3 thoughts I have to go through here. One is, like, even in your case in particular, like, you don't like most mainstream cinema anyways. So the fact that it's, I mean, it's, if it was a straight movie versus a gay movie, it doesn't matter, because it's mainstream cinema. You're kind of less likely to like it anyways.
Right, but I'm also talking about critically mainstream, because I don't think, like, A Room with a View was like, like, but you know, whenever it, like, they weren't making the money that, like, Beverly Hills Cop was making, or, you know, that kind of thing. There's also critically mainstream to me.
And here's two films that I think, one that sort of goes with your point, and one that is almost like contrary to your point, and yet somehow isn't. So one that goes with your point is, so Call Me by Your Name was a really big film a couple years ago. I had a few issues with it, though. It's kind of, I feel like I need to rewatch it, because I wonder if I just got that one wrong, you know. But I mean, I thought it was good. For the record, I thought it was good. I just didn't think it was great like everybody else did. Anyways, but it is a good movie, but it has a downer ending, and it got nominated, and it got, you know, noticed, and all these things. So that kind of goes with your point, and that was effectively mainstream.
And I wanted to clarify, a romantically downer ending. We're not talking bleak endings like, you know, Boys Don't Cry or Monster or those kind. We're just talking about romantically downbeat.
Yeah. And then the other one is the film that won not last year, but the year before, Green Book, which is like, there's a happy movie about race. I mean, you know, again, not happy. I mean, it's still about people in the, what decade was that Green Book was in? 50s, yeah. And it's like, but it's like, it's kind 60s. But it's a funny movie and about accepting people and all that.
Yeah.
And yet that movie was like, got a lot of attention for everybody, but was like critically panned. Yeah. So in a weird way, it kind of goes with your point, because like critics didn't like it at all. And mind you, I think Green Book is fine. I thought it was, like, I think you and me were both in that weird camp where it's like, it's not really that good, and it's weirdly unprogressive, because it feels like a reverse Driving Miss Daisy, like 20 years after that movie, or 25 years or whatever. So it was weird, but like, it was a fine movie, and everybody else either loved it or hated it, it seemed like.
Yeah.
And anyways, but that's our own personal thoughts. But in a weird way, it kind of goes to your points, because critically it was panned. Like, everybody was like, this doesn't, you know, hated it. This doesn't, but like, people liked it because it was happy. So that's kind of, so I'm like, that's interesting too. Like, what do you think of that one? And mind you, and it's about a gay guy technically. So
Yeah. Green Book's a weird one. I don't even know. Like, I get what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, it's also because what I was talking about a little bit with Maurice, with you, which I could go into with you, and I did mention it in the post, is that there's some weird, and also, 87 was a different year than 2005. There's more going on to that. But there's this weird thing going on where you have Maurice, which is actually written, produced by gay men, not getting the attention that Brokeback Mountain gets when it's mostly written and produced by straight people. It kind of speaks to that broader problem that I think you are talking about a little bit with Green Book, where you have, Black Panther was directed by a Black man starring many Black actors, and that was great about Black Panther. It wasn't. And Wonder Woman was about a woman directed by a woman. And I don't need that kind of thing all the time, but we have so little of it that I don't need, it's not that I don't think straight people, I think women should make movies about men. I think men should make movies about women and so on. But there's something about when you have so few entries into a certain mainstream genre.
Yeah.
And those entries are about a minority, but that minority isn't represented in the production crew, that it's a problem. If we had 50 Love Simons, it would be a different story. And this is what you and I have also just talked about when you're looking at minority-centered films in general. It's like sometimes your bucket is so small that, you don't want to poop on the one film of that kind.
Yeah, it's like
that's coming from a group of people that don't have, resources and attention.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't hold up to Citizen Kane,
Yeah, well, it's like with the Watermelon Woman, it's like I have, the filmmaking, there are issues, and it's not because Cheryl Dunye and her crew doesn't know how to make films, it's because they had no money. And it was also probably an early film in a lot of their careers. But it's kind of hard.
She also knew what to I need a moment, actually, because this cat is losing its mind. Hold on.
All right, well, we'll pause for a second here. All right, we've resumed.
Okay. I think Cheryl Dunye did really good at...
well, she did a lot with a little.
Yeah, and she had a story that fit it well and so on. So I don't think her films suffers for its lack of financing.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's almost more impressive when you do a lot with a little, like, even although Citizen Kane is also impressive because there wasn't a lot of films like that. So, but but like at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I know there are plenty of LGBTQIA films out there, and plenty that probably have, mixed race couples and stuff like that. I don't know them. And it's also hard. It's even like, I've only seen like so many movies where the main couple is mixed race lesbian or something, and it's hard to badmouth it, even though there might be a few others. But it's also a question of like, the Watermelon Woman, I think, didn't get much distribution, if it got any. I forget what happened.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Especially because like, even you and me here talking about it, like, how many people have seen the Watermelon Woman, even with, the recent push for people to be more inclusive? Like, if you go to like Disney Plus to look what they have for like, which is probably, and like Netflix has more, but like these two streaming services have for like inclusive cinema, it's like mainstream cinema. Like Spike Lee's films are on Netflix, and those are all in the like Black Lives Matter sections, and that's great. But like, how many people who aren't already on the Criterion channel, who are probably going to want to watch Watermelon Woman anyway, going to go watch Watermelon Woman? It's one of those things where it's like,
that's why it's great though that we have these streaming services now, because part of the reason why I think I never came across Maurice is I don't know that it was in why, like, how would I have come across it before? They reissued it apparently in 2017, because that's when I found a lot of info about it. But like, if it wasn't on tape, they only had so many prints, I guess, of the tape, if it didn't make it to DVD. And now with streaming, I think it's great that we have a chance, because you and I would not have been able to watch Watermelon Woman. I was talking about this the first time I saw LA Plays Itself, I wanted to see a number of those films that he mentions at the end that are the LA Rebellion, the Black directors in Los Angeles who made these independent films. I couldn't find a Charles Burnett film anywhere. I couldn't find Bless Their Little Hearts. It wasn't streaming on Netflix. I couldn't get the DVD. I mean, and now these things are more available. So that's great. I'm happy about that.
We talked about this before. There's that interesting thing where you lose movies when you jump from media to media, like when you go from screen to VHS, and then from VHS to Laserdisc, or Laserdisc to DVD, and DVD to Blu-ray, and Blu-ray to streaming. But streaming is so much more accessible.
Laserdisc was really an offshoot rather than
fair. But like it's interesting, but it is more widely available. So it is. I really appreciate that too, because I can watch The Watermelon Woman, and I can watch any number of these movies. A quick side note: the Maurice is Merchant and Ivory, and I know who Merchant and Ivory are because I think, if one of them passed away, I think it's Merchant who passed away. And Ivory is the one who worked on Call Me By Your Name. I believe he wrote it. And so, or at least was co-writer. You can look up the specifics. And like they're well known for being, I think, having made a lot of films about.
It's not Ivory. Merchant passed away.
Merchant passed away, and Ivory was the.
Yeah, it was Ismail Merchant. So they were actually also, I'm pretty sure, a mixed race couple on top of it.
Yeah. And they'd been making films for many decades. Like I think they were well known for in the LGBTQIA, if not mainstream, but just in that community for being.
Right. Howard's End. I'm right. They did. And I haven't seen Howard's End. I really like A Room with a View. I think you would enjoy it and should watch it. I keep meaning to, because when Call Me By Your Name came out, I saw somebody's video essay about it, and it covered, a part of that video was covering Merchant and Ivory because it was a huge influence on the film, at least for the video essay. And I just keep meaning to go and look it up, but like anything, there's too many movies. Well, but also remind me, now I'm mixed on Call Me By Your Name. Now that is, he is the director of that.
I believe Luca, the director Guadagnino, right?
Yeah, thank you. I think you said that pretty right. He is.
I thought he was gay.
He is gay.
Yeah, he's gay.
And something I noticed with that film, something I really liked about it was the amount of sensuality in it. Yeah. That it was, regardless of, my problems with Call Me By Your Name have more to do just with the source material. I think it gets a little academic in a way, and this kind of like, I don't know, it bothers me a little bit. The way the characters' feelings work out feels like an older man writing about younger men, honestly, to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the sensuality of it, just the amount of like male leg hair and stuff, I thought, and I think a straight person could probably do that, but I think it helps if you're a gay man.
There's Moonlight.
Yeah, but Moonlight. Moonlight isn't as sensual. I love Moonlight. But it's not as sensual. It admires the male form for sure.
It isn't sensual, though, you're right.
But it's about performative maleness more than like just like skin on skin.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And that was one of the things to me about Love, Simon, is it was, I mean, and I guess
Love, Simon is almost sexless in some parts.
Yeah, and I guess the John Hughes films weren't very sexual or sensual or anything like that. So
Breakfast Club, right?
Yeah, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink.
I've seen Breakfast Club. In Breakfast Club, doesn't somebody like go underneath the table and like start messing around with a woman? And now that scene is like really problematic. I don't know if that's really sexual as opposed to being supposed to be like humorous.
He doesn't mess around. Like, that makes it sound really objectionable. Like, he doesn't touch her or anything, but I think he looks between her skirt or something like that.
I can't remember the scene that well.
But that was this. But that's why I kind of, part of what I liked that I mentioned about the way he looks, which is that Brazilian film from like 2014, is there's no sex in it, but there is an awareness that part of this young man realizing that he has feelings. Honestly, I'm not sure he even ever says he's gay. He just falls in love with another boy.
Yeah.
Is part of it's him kind of having an awareness of his body. And it's also, he's also growing up. So it's also part of that. And Love, Simon didn't, have anything. It was, it was way more mainstream as a result. And yeah, the other thing, as you were mentioning, like I've seen so much LGBT cinema coming from the international, and I don't know if that's just what reaches the United States. But yeah, and not all of it's happy. A lot of it isn't. But there's Rafiki and Temblores and Fantastic Woman and the Heiresses.
Yeah.
And
well, but that part of that is also the audience, right? Like there's this weird, like, because we're talking about, a part of this is you being a little annoyed at mainstream cinema and how it approaches and how critics and just what is available mainstream how that is dealt with by the people in power who seem to make the decisions to put these movies forward or to criticize movies a certain way. Whereas with foreign films, you are more likely to get a diverse array of things. However, most foreign film is kind of serious or, it is kind of dramatic. And like, if it's going to be represented at the Oscars, somebody better die or something really tragic must happen in general. So like, I feel like there is also even an expectation with foreign films where you have an audience who's more interested in a diverse kind of film than the mainstream is.
Yeah.
And so, and so you might be more likely to find a foreign film where there's going to be a happy ending for a minority group or for, whatever. But you're also just as likely to find really downer stuff because that's the audience for it. So there's something there too, right?
Yeah, but for me, it's also just about critical attention. Something doesn't have to win awards; it can just have people talking about it.
Oh yeah, I don't care about awards, but just kind of like those are the foreign films that might get noticed mainstream.
Yeah, and for the record, I'm happy Love, Simon exists. I think I just want more Love, Simons, so that we can have a little more. And that's, again, it's not like I object to Brokeback Mountain existing. It just was like, why can't we have more because we watched Spike Lee and Barry Jenkins talking yesterday, and I think Spike Lee and I think both of them talked about like, there's no monolithic like Black experience. And I have personally been frustrated by like the woman experience and I think I even talked about this last time,
Yeah.
So that's why you need like, you don't just need a Black film or a film about gay men. You need like dozens of them.
Well, this actually reaches, okay, I have one other thought, and I have a thought and more thing to say. One thought was I meant to say about Green Book, that I believe Octavia Spencer, you keep making me mess that up. And
you think it's Octavia Butler? Yeah,
because you keep making that mistake. But Octavia Spencer was a producer on that, and I think she's like one of the first Black women to get an Oscar as a producer on like a Best Picture thing. And so there's that, there's that weird thing where it's like there's also that aspect to it that like people kind of like vaguely commented on but then ignored, and it's like Green Book is just has a weird place in culture now.
Well, but it also makes me think of like how everyone's watching The Help now, and everybody else is like, that is not.
I haven't seen The Help. I feel like I need to watch it just to know. But
I've seen The Help. It's not. I think it's kind of in line with Green Book, frankly, where it's like like here's a Black experience seen through white eyes in a way that's like.
And if we had none of those movies, maybe that would be interesting. But because that's how it's usually been shown, it's not as interesting. And maybe we should be doing something else with our time.
It's not a great,
Yeah. Well, and so my other thought is like, there's this idea, a lot of times when we talk about representation, there's this like, well, the population in the US is this amount white, this amount Black, this amount Latino, this amount Asian, Japanese, this amount Chinese, this amount whatever. Right. And you keep going down. And you can get even more granular than that if you want. So like, how does that represent itself? Like, well, in any job, you want to have roughly the distribution of the population. It doesn't have to be exactly right.
Right.
It almost never is. And obviously certain jobs are like predominantly, like directing, it's predominantly men. Right. And that's not how that should be. And predominantly white, and that's not how that should be. But the thing is, people talk about it in terms of like, well, we should get more closer to like whatever the population is, to represent the population in that job, in that field. And that
Right.
might also be true for media, where like we should have a certain
Yeah.
amount of media should represent people in a certain, of a community. Now, I've always thought, and this is not, I've not looked into this. I don't know, I'm not fully versed on this subject, but I've always been like, that doesn't make sense to me. You actually want to have more representation of minorities than you do of the majority to me. Like you could have, like, because the majority, I don't know, I can't remember what the population is, so I can't remember, like, if the population of white people in America is 70%, you probably only want like 50 or 40 or 45% of your movies to be focused on that kind of culture, and you want to have a little bit of overflow on the minorities to me, because
Mhm.
otherwise, like, what if it's 100, and if your population 1% of it is queer Chinese,
Yeah.
and you get one queer Chinese movie a year, or maybe two, or maybe three, depending on how many. Like that doesn't seem like enough. Like you want
Yeah.
an overrepresentation of the minority. Like, and I'm spitballing.
Right.
So like that
Well,
even.
and I mean, we also have at this point 100 years of one mainstream,
That too.
not one viewpoint, but a very, I mean, and that's even, what was I talking about it in reference? Oh, I was talking about it in reference to Variety. Like, I'm a middle-class white woman, and I can't find myself in movies that often because it's certain kinds of middle-class white women that you see in movies.
Much like black culture isn't monolithic, white culture isn't monolithic either. So
right,
it's possible for the outliers of white culture to not be represented on stream.
Yeah, so I think that also speaks to a lack of diversity, and I really loved Variety. I really loved it. It's like the difference between, like, I love many movies that aren't about me in any way.
Totally.
Movies that are, but
we talked about Moonlight earlier.
There's like a movie of your heart sometimes, like where it's like it just hits you in the heart in a different way, and like Variety is that kind of a movie to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it the greatest movie of all time, but it makes it like very personal.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know. I think we've kind of riffed on that pretty well.
We've gone. Your rant led to a very interesting conversation, I think. So we should probably move on to the next.
More diversity and inclusivity, please. I'm tired of war films. I'm so tired of war films.
Yeah.
Different kinds of war films. There were other wars.